My name is Jesse Rogers, as you had. I work with Standard Group PLC, whose subsidiary is KTN News. And that's why perhaps I'm a familiar face right now. So I'll try and break down my journey in the career I am in. That's the media field, which, needless to say, is constantly growing and changing. You know, how news is delivered today bears little resemblance to perhaps 20 years ago or 10 years ago when I was watching the likes of Catherine and whatnot. And this is perhaps attributed to the change in the media space. Internet is definitely a great disruptor, but others also choose to look at it as a great enabler as well. So it's all to do with self-knowledge and which specific path you want to take in the media field. And something Maureen mentioned really stuck with me, and I think that's where I'll start. That transition period. You've just finished campus, you're trying to look for work, and then you keep on hearing that most managers are looking for experience. When you're looking at those job applications, 2 to 3 years experience is usually one of the taglines they use. Well, that scared me at first, I must say, but it didn't stop me. And I think I'll get to break it down just a little bit on how I was able to overcome such challenges and still was able to sell myself at a young age. Because just as one of the other speakers mentioned, the goal perhaps is to be headhunted. You don't want to be part of the flock, We're all trying to stand out in terms of our careers. Anyway, interestingly, I studied at Kenyatta University. And at the time I was there, they happened to start a radio campus station. And just like any inquisitive young fella who had an interest in this particular field, I chose to give it a try. And I think that's the very first step. You really need to know what you want in life. That self-knowledge sort of view that you see, this is where I can add value if I'm able to invest my time, if I'm able to cultivate on certain skills, and this might take me to the next level. So started really small, campus radio for roughly 2.5 years. Then they happened to start a TV station still within the same university. And after having 2.5 years experience, I was like, perhaps I can give it a shot. I know it's a different realm. There's usually a joke within the media industry. Guys who do radio have radio faces. So I wanted to try and see if my face would fit on the TV as well. And at that point, perhaps there were different things driving me. Of course, self-actualization and whatnot. But at the initial point of view, my initial motivating, my driving force was trying to make something out of myself. And perhaps I approached it in the wrong way as well, because with media comes the attention, you're a familiar face. Others might think you're a celebrity. So at first I was really focused on that. But when I got to really get the feel of it, starting small at the campus TV station, you get to realize that content is king, So it's little about how you look. How you look is very important. You have to brand yourself, as you can see. I'm in a tie, and trust you me, it's really hot outside. I'm in Coast, just to give a disclaimer. But yes, so that was my journey. Started small, and I got to realize content is king at the very fast onset rather. So how exactly do I get from that level to the next after realizing that, sure, there might be a couple of good looking faces on TV, but how do you sell yourself and get the employer to, come for you and want to make you part of a different organization? Because that was the goal. I saw KUTV as a stepping stone to the next level. So what I mentioned earlier on, self-knowledge is quite very important, and exploration as well. For those young-minded fellows who are actually listening right now, I think that's why Centonomy Hub and such programs are very important, because our education system sort of inculcates you to think, you study, after that, you'll get a job. What next? There's something called financial literacy 101 as well. We barely get this in school, in our school systems. So there's so much more. And I think that's why education is a very important foundation. Wherever you start, you really need to invest in yourself, whether through such programs, which are sort of detailed to take you to the next level. And that's one of the key secrets to job success. So when I got to realize that content is king, as they mentioned, you really need to sort of change your mindset to, trying to smile less and attract the viewers with this and that, but use your content as a major selling point. So I made sure I was doing news on a daily basis, despite being in class, it was a tight schedule, but eventually things pay off. And that's one thing we need to know, that things naturally shouldn't come that easy, especially with the advent of social media. For the young fellas, you might think, someone posts, life is easy, life is good, but you barely see the hard work behind the scenes, the sacrifice as well. So I had to sacrifice chilling with some of the friends. I had to drop a couple of friends because you don't have time. You're juggling between books on one side and trying to create a career on the other at a very early stage. So that was one of the main challenges. Luckily, I was able to juggle it. And after, taking a look at what value I can offer, maximizing on it in the media industry, be it features, be it trying to handle different platforms. I started off doing entertainment, believe it or not. I would tell you the latest song, and all that, but I had to reinvent myself because I saw news was the way to go for me. And that's where my strength was. And I got to realize it, luckily, at a very young age. So going forth, luckily I was headhunted from the campus TV station, and the rest, as they say, is history. But I'll definitely try and take a look at some of the challenges that I got from the onset. As I mentioned, the media industry is definitely changing. When I was watching the likes of Catherine Kasavuli and those big names who used to anchor news back then, watching news was religious. Your dad would take hold of the remote and silence would prevail. You're listening. But right now, with the phones and whatnot, it's so easy to interact with news. You don't really have to watch it. Twitter is definitely one of our major competitors. But regardless of that, we all have to coexist in this space. Now, joining a big company like Standard Group PLC, you find major brands, guys who have established themselves already. And that's where you actually decide, or you take a route of having to be intentional with your approach. If you're trying to build yourself as a brand, if you're trying to, get to the next level in your career, if let's say I'm trying to aim to BBC, well, what exactly do I need to do to get to the next level? And that's why I got intentional with my approach, especially at work. And it's also proper to note that, career management is a must if you expect to maximize success and happiness for the hours, over 40 hours in a week. Those hours you invest in work, you really have to take a look at career management and equally have a keen ear to the opportunities that are there. Many employees don't look past their current job or the next promotion that they're angling for. And something that Maureen mentioned, those 3 goals that you have to write down, they're usually overemphasized. By the time July comes, you can barely remember what you wrote in January. But the fact that you're holding yourself to account, I think that's the bigger picture. You really have to hold yourself to account. You have to be intentional with your approach. The first step is setting goals, and you have to create a plan to achieve them. So be constant, be intentional with some of these plans. and not each and every one of them will be achieved under the certain time frame. Don't be too hard on yourself as well. I mean, we're human. This is a journey, not a destination, as I mentioned. So just be intentional as much as possible. Remind yourself in July that I set out to perhaps do a feature story highlighting the COVID-19 issues in the country, and try and do that and submit it, and you might just get an award. Who knows? So you really have to be intentional around that. You equally have to develop a timeline and include the milestones you really want to achieve. That's part of owning your career path. And I really got to learn this with interacting with Waithaka Gatumi on the side and such knowledgeable fellas that, add value to you. So also check your circle. For the young fellas who are watching right now and you really want to get to the next level, I mean, your circle will either challenge you, will either perhaps slow you down, unfortunately. So try and cultivate the people you hang around with. Take a look at the value. It should be both ways. And I mentioned planning is very important. I mean, at the onset of my career, just joining KTN News, you're at the entry level. How do I get to the next level? Is it more visibility? Is it, trying to brand myself, trying to look the part, even though I am barely acting the part, So at times you really have to take on these challenges head on and prepare for yourself. The media is a highly competitive industry. I really need to mention that, because if I ask you to mention, notable media personalities off your head, you'll definitely start with the likes locally, perhaps the likes of Jeff Koinange and whatnot. And I might feature around number 10 over there. So how do I get myself to the likes of the Jeff Koinange and whoever is regarded as a bigwig in the media industry? Having a plan is very important. Without one, you can feel rudderless. You might not have a benchmark against which you can measure your own progress within your career. Equally, as I mentioned, keep your circle, you have to be intentional with your circle and keep your circle close. The moment I joined, you try and reach out to some of your colleagues. I mentioned it's a competitive area, quite competitive, but you need to cultivate relationships with your colleagues. And that's what networking really is. You just don't network outside the company, but equally inside. And at the onset, when you join, trust me, I mentioned I happened to start with entertainment and slowly transitioned into news, because that's where my passion is. During the entry level, and this goes out to the young fellas, you really need to keep an open mind about the type of work you want to do. Of course, I had a goal of becoming a news anchor and getting to the levels of the who is who in the industry. But at the onset, I need to show my employers that I can handle the task they've given me, first of all, before I transition to the next. So don't look down at, the entry level. Maureen equally mentioned that particular security guard who used to work in the bank. I don't know what he did. I'd like to know a little bit later on, but I'm pretty sure he kept an open mind. And with the goal in mind, you'll definitely get there if you're intentional. So as I mentioned, the media is quite competitive, and it's equally important to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Equally, that goes a long way, because the value you give to your employer should sort of, take you to the next level, but equally, what value are you giving yourself? And that's why earlier on I mentioned that personal development, investing in yourself, such classes will definitely get you to the next level, because trust you me, you can always learn from someone else. That's one important thing. Now, in terms of my foundations of success, what I view as success, as I mentioned, media is quite competitive, and on-job success is contributed by various things, be it, your personal branding. Perhaps I can start from there, and I know Mwenesi is definitely well versed in this particular area, and that's why I had to do a tie over here, trying to outsmart him. But just a light joke. But anyway, personal branding, especially in the media industry, will go a long way in selling you. You might have the content, but if you don't look the part, I'm pretty sure Maureen will easily, take hold of the remote and switch to yet another channel who might be saying the same thing I'm saying, but they look the part. So personal branding. And with media, you really have to be cautious about how you carry yourself with the age of internet and bloggers and whatnot. Yes, you really have to be cautious about, where you hang out, if you hang out, which type of friends you keep close, because most people want to associate with a familiar face. That feeling of, I know a celebrity, but what are they giving in return? So you really have to evaluate your circle. And luckily, I learned that from the onset. So branding is very important in order to be seen and heard by whoever matters. Is it the decision makers? If I happen to bump into my boss who's just coming from the third floor boardroom and he mentions, perhaps the TV was on mute and he mentions, hey, I liked how you look, and I happen to make a couple of mistakes, but the smile on your face will definitely hide it. It gives you an aura of confidence. That's very important. The next foundation of success, especially for those who are angling to join the media industry, you need to develop a niche. Let it sell you. This will actually make you, headhunted, if that is the goal in mind. Because how do you stand out in a pool of well-educated people, individuals who have invested time, who have vast experience, who are perhaps even more experienced than you? How do you stand out? And in the media industry, you definitely have to develop a niche. There are those who are really good in doing stories, feature stories, and you can see the likes of the current member of parliament for Nyali, Mohammed Ali, Chicho Pevu actually got him to the next level. That was his niche and he ran with it. The likes of Dennis Onsarigo and whatnot. There's equally the likes of Jeff Koinange, who's really good on the screen. You have a good on-air presence. You can definitely go a long way in maximizing this. So there are different avenues. You have to be intentional. Try and develop a niche wherever you are. If you're at the starting level, beginner, middle level, develop a niche and it will definitely take you to the next level. I equally mentioned it's competitive and you have to sort of create value where you work. People should see you, people should feel you. And that can be translated perhaps in, I can give an example. When I joined Standard Group PLC, I happened to do lunchtime news at that particular point in mind, but that wasn't the goal. That was the entry level, So I'm trying to calculate, how do I get myself, how do I endear myself to my bosses? So if, let's say, the likes of one senior anchor is unwell, who will they be thinking of, So I'm like, okay, so I need to sort of do this and this and this to get to the next level. If it's maintaining a healthy working relationship with your bosses, with your colleagues, trust you me, I know small talk is not easy, especially in the office, but it might go a long way in pushing you. You can be vocal about what you want. Approach your boss and mention that perhaps I have this goal in mind. I'd like to start such a show. And they tell you you're not yet ready. So you don't stop there, you ask, so what do I need to do to get ready? If it's doing more stories, if it's handling bigger interviews, just strive to get that opportunity. And while you do that, you're marketing yourself. That's a good thing with the media industry. If they happen to switch on the TV or they're on their phone and they see a current discussion and you're there, you're marketing yourself. So it's always an interview in the media industry. You never know if your next boss is watching, if your next business partner is watching. So always be on your toes. I know there's a narrative that perhaps TV sirens are all smiles, makeup, You have to look the part, dress really well, but there's really more to that. As I mentioned on the onset, rather, content is king. So read into what you want to focus on. If it's politics, this being a political year, trust you me, you better know how the timelines by IEBC fall through. By April 9th, parties should have submitted what and what. And when you get the chance to do a link on air, once you have really invested in yourself, in the content, in your branding, and you get that chance, this will be an interview and you never know who is watching. So market yourself, cultivate relationships with your colleagues, develop contacts, especially within the media industry. This is one of the foundations of success. If a breaking news story develops, you would have an added advantage if you have a contact on your list that will give more insight into a particular breaking story. So you really have to be aggressive, especially if you want to make it at the early stage. So creating value, branding yourself, develop a niche, keeping an open mind about the type of work you want to do. You have to be intentional with your approach, on your career path as well. So benchmark, write it down, take a look at the actionable steps you have. At the beginning of the year, I personally write it down. And one of my main goals, I hope my current employers are not listening, is perhaps to transition to an international media station. So what do I need to do to achieve this? Do international media stations have a high affinity to politics? If not, what do they have a high affinity to? Is it human interest stories? Are you strong in that? What do I need to do to perhaps highlight a story that will get me an award and get me recognized by an international media station? So it's definitely a journey. It's not a destination. Number two, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Because I graduated with some of my classmates, and up till now, perhaps some of them, unfortunately, do not have formal employment, especially in the field that they studied in. And that's a current challenge, bearing in mind the COVID-19 disruption and the pandemic and the state of economy and whatnot. What we need to learn is to apply the knowledge we learned in campus or whatever level or whatever institution you went to. How can you apply that knowledge? So as much as you're looking for work, as much as you're trying to get different job, you're doing something and applying the knowledge you learned. I think that will definitely get you to the next level. It's not easy. It might not have satisfaction of money at the onset, but trust you me, Waswahili say mahaba na haba hujaza kibaba. The little you do will definitely go a long way. And your employer, finally, when they're taking a look at the 2 years or 3 years experience, trust you me, that little internship you do, the volunteering you did, it might go a long way. It might not have monetary satisfaction, but you will definitely be able to create contacts. You'll be able to, market yourself, and it will still have value. So at the onset, don't give